October is National Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and there's one awareness campaign that's promoting healthy relationships among queer and trans people of color. That local campaign is being led by a number of organizations working together as the Todas Collaborative. We'd like to welcome the coordinator from the collaborative, Francesca Contreras. Also with us from the collaborative is Vilma Uribe. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
I want to start with Francesca. First of all, talk about the kinds of combinations of people working on this, because there are a number of bases that are being covered.
So the organizations that are coming together on this campaign? Sure. So the Todas Collaborative is a collaboration between 4 agencies in Boston. And so that would be the Hispanic Black Gay Coalition, Fenway Health's Violence Recovery Program, Renewal House, which is a domestic violence shelter of the Urban Ministry, the Unitarian Universalist Urban Ministry, and then the network La Red, which Vilma is from.
Vilma, you know, when we bring up the topic of domestic violence, the first thing we think of is somebody who's doing something wrong. But I guess this campaign, the focus isn't on what's wrong. I guess it's on how things should be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we really wanted to kind of create a new vision for our community, recognizing that there are not that many, there really is not that many images of our queer and trans community, at least here in Boston. Mm-hmm. And we wanted to kind of, talk about kind of resources that are available, but also kind of imagine what do healthy relationships look like in our community.
Well, one of the things that's complicated for people who might be looking at this from the outside is that, you know, when you have straight people or if you have same-sex relationships, you get a sense that there's something in common. But I guess with these other relationships, you might have two people with different orientations who are trying to hang in together.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the purpose of this campaign is to highlight kind of our community's identities, but also to kind of really look at, yes, there are certain tactics that do kind of come up in abusive relationships in our community, but also like what are the places where our identities could really be uplifted, besides kind of the various tactics that like an abuser uses, which is what is oftentimes uplifted in kind of like awareness campaigns around domestic violence.
What does that mean, to uplift?
Uplift? I think it means to give light. You know, I think there are very few representations of us in the media, and if they are, they do tend to be more on, they're not as positive. I think this past year we've heard about the growing number of murder rates in the queer and trans community, or the deaths in our community, and we want to kind of reimagine that and kind of say we're here, you know, and also that we are a vibrant community.
Francesca, I guess talk about the importance of awareness here, because you want to get people talking who haven't been talking before.
Absolutely, yes. So I think in general, a large part of what happens with partner abuse or domestic violence, especially in relationships for LGBTQ people of color, is that there's a lot of silence. So there's a lot of stigma, right? And we look at the history of the kind of domestic violence movement, and on the one hand, we say, okay, well, since the 1970s, activists have done tremendous work in making domestic violence a public health issue and framing it as such. Like, this is not something that's just private, happening in the home, but something we need to talk about and address. And what's happened in the process of that movement that has been historically really led by white feminists, and oftentimes straight white feminists, is that that's who's been depicted as the victim. You have a white woman in a straight relationship and who's getting beaten physically, and that's domestic violence. And so in reality, we know in our communities, this is happening to gay Latino men, this is happening to transgender immigrants, it's happening in all our communities, and there's a lot of silence around there. And so it's hard to, first we want to say this happens in our communities too, and there's support. There are services and support because people are suffering in isolation, oftentimes, unable to even come out about their sexual orientation or gender identity to their families, to their communities. And so there's that level of isolation that is compounded then by the abusive relationship. And so we want to shift the awareness around what is partner abuse, who does it impact, and then also, that there are resources out there.
What about that, Vilma? Because people might say, oh, there are these agencies that we've always thought of as, man on woman kind of agencies, and English speaking. So what if your language isn't English, and what if you're not in a male-female relationship?
Yeah, I think it can be hard because I think there are agencies that, domestic violence agencies that are willing to kind of open their doors. But what I find kind of in my work when trying to advocate for, let's say, a trans Latino survivor, it's like staff at perhaps these agencies don't feel like as equipped. And I think for us, a lot of our work is also breaking down kind of stigmas around kind of our communities as well. Besides kind of doing the work around the partner abuse. Because I think for the most part, our communities have been, we've been at the margins in so many ways. And now we want to be like, we're here, let's support, for providers, we also want to let them know we're also here to support you too.
The other thing, Francesca, I was thinking, looking at some of the images about what you saw as healthy in relationship. It's also about letting the partners feel that they should value certain kinds of behavior that maybe before they didn't value. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's something we're also trying to depict is that, we want to start talking about what is a healthy relationship? What would your ideal relationship look like? So that everyone can start to imagine that, and we can start to see through the images in the campaign that actually, one component of a healthy relationship might be your ability to have lots of friendships and thriving friendships. So one of the designs says, my partner or my boo encourages my friendships, and so as a survivor of partner abuse, I wasn't allowed to have friends, and I would get guilt tripped, right? To make it seem like, oh, if I went out with my friends, then I didn't love this person. And so, so that's part of the imagining. It's like, it looks like healthy relationships. It looks like my partner honors all of my identities, and doesn't say, oh, well, you're not a real lesbian because you're bisexual, or, that's not, you're not Black enough or not Latino enough. And so there are all these different forms in which our identities are undermined. So a healthy relationship would be like, my partner honors all of those identities.
I know you have your messages in English, Spanish, and Portuguese, so if people want to get in touch, find out more, what's the best way for them to do that?
Go to our website, todasinaction.org, and it's I know it's on the displays in the background, and contact us through there.
Great, thank you both very much, Francesca Contreras and Vilma Uribe.